Welcome to the Clear the Shelf podcast with Chris and Chris, the show that meets at the intersection of education and entertainment to discuss online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, wholesale, and all facets of selling on Amazon. We'll bring you news, tactics, strategies, insights, stories, and interviews to help you grow your Amazon business. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Grant and Chris Rasick. What's up, Amazon sellers, and welcome back to the Clear the Shelf podcast with myself and my paraphrastic co-host, Chris Rasick. Today, we're going to talk more about mental models to help you think like a seven-figure Amazon seller. I said in our last episode that I believe we have a bit of an endemic problem in the Amazon community, which is the disease of overcomplication. Arbitrage, whether it's online, retail, or wholesale, is really pretty simple. It kind of breaks down to, does it sell? Is it profitable? Can I sell it? Yes, there are other factors that need to be considered and we've talked about those at length on this podcast. But I think we think if we get better at mental models and first principle thinking, we can make faster, better decisions without all the mental fog that comes from overcomplicating things, which is something humans are prone to do. You know, we've got a lizard brain. Information is good, more must be better, and the most information must be the most better. But this isn't always the case, and we can often add by subtracting. That was the goal of the last episode about mental models, and we're going to continue it today because honestly, we got a whole lot better feedback than I was expecting from that episode. And so our goal is to help you simplify your decision-making process using these frameworks. But before we dive in, you know the drill. It takes us minutes to prepare for this show, and we'd like to make an agreement with you, a digital handshake, if you will. We make the episodes, and if you like them, do us a solid, hit the like button, hit subscribe, leave a comment wherever you're listening. The only way for us to grow is to tickle the algorithms of the distribution platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And the best way we know to do that is to get you to interact. We'll hold up our end of the deal by showing up every week with a new show. You hold up your end of the deal by interacting with the podcast. That sounds like a deal? Let's go ahead and dive in. So, all right. So, Chris, in the last episode, which we got much better feedback than I was expecting. I was absolutely stoked by that because I know you and I like to geek out about this kind of stuff.
Big time.
And I'll make sure that if you didn't check out that episode, that it's in the show notes so you can go and look at the first one. But in case you missed it, let's recap a little bit. A mental model is a tool or framework that you can use to understand and interpret the world around you. And I mean, these are things that people like Elon Musk use, you know, with first principles thinking, all the way to things as complicated as physics, but they can be used with your Amazon business as well. It's kind of like putting on a pair of those thick glasses, you know, the ones that are so thick that you can like see the future. And these glasses help you filter out the noise to find the signal, which is what we really need, especially in such a noisy environment that we work in. And they help you focus on what's important. They help you see situations more clearly. You don't need abstract concepts or strung together flow charts that make you look like Charlie and It's Always Sunny. Instead, we can kind of use these practical ways of thinking to help guide our decisions, from just small daily tasks to even some of the more complex business challenges. If you read or listen to podcasts about business leaders like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Palmer Luckey, all these other people who are running these massive, complex organizations, they use mental models just like we can. As an Amazon seller, you've probably got a ton on your plate. You got family, maybe you've got a job, maybe you've got maybe your side hustle has a side hustle. And so these mental models can be useful because you can kind of clear that mental clutter to make decisions faster and make them a little bit more clear. It's kind of like a shortcut for your brain, even if my brain likes to take the windy back roads, especially when it's time to get some rest. But let's go ahead and let's dive into some of these. The first one I want to talk about today is the model of inversion. And it's approaching a problem by thinking backward. What could go wrong? Or like Chris has said maybe a dozen times on the show, what's the worst that could happen? Before purchasing inventory, think about what could make it a bad investment, competition, a trend fading, and mitigate those risks. Imagine you're at Walmart. You find this killer product. It's got great margins in the clearance aisle. Instead of focusing solely on the upside, inversion would prompt you to think, well, what could go wrong? Is there a potential for increased competition? So is this item, is it on a national clearance, or is it just being clearanced locally? Is this easily available online at other retailers at a similar price where anybody could get it? Is it also on clearance over at Target and Meijer, or has a bunch of it just hit Ollie's? Could this be an item that maybe is not trending any longer? Was it an item that was very trendy and it's on the tail end and nobody's really buying it anymore? If you can identify these potential risks first, you can often protect yourself from making a bad decision. Now, there is a little bit of a need to be careful with this particular model because it's easy to slip into overthinking and get analysis paralysis.
Yeah, this one is it's very easy to overthink and get carried away with this one. But this is kind of like one of my default settings, because really we'll touch on this later too. But basically it gets down to bandwidth. I mean, how much are you going to dedicate? How much of your energy are you going to dedicate when you can simply work backwards like this? I always talk about just make worst case scenario non-catastrophic, and that's basically where you're kind of setting the floor on what the worst is, and if it makes you uncomfortable, if worst case scenario, true worst case scenario, and as long as you're not making up things out of thin air, that there's no evidence of happening before. I mean, as long as you're working backwards and just kind of set the floor and stay comfortable. A good example is like when I'm looking at leads. I know there are a lot of sellers that once they start seeing the pinch, right, when the price starts coming down and the seller count starts going up, they'll punt right there. And that's not where I punt. I take a little bit more time with it. Because number one, no one knows why the seller count's rising. We make assumptions, which we'll talk about that later too. But we make assumptions, it must be on a lead list, and then when you say that to yourself, you go, okay, lead lists have 50 people, and whoever they share it with, right? So in our heads, we have this vision of 150 sellers just coming in, and they're all 0% ROI pricing models. They're all penny under a buy box, with cheap repricers if they even have one, and it's gonna go to zero, right? And you're gonna sell it at a loss. That's a horrible decision. But when sometimes that is the case, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying tanking doesn't exist, right? But I've seen plenty where there's evidence of the pinch, but if you've manufactured enough profit, you could actually get in and out before anything bad happens, before even hitting your minimum threshold on your ROI. I think you have to look at the velocity and you basically just what you're doing is using inversion. What I'm doing in this scenario is, okay, how much room do I have? If it's selling at 50, but my break even is low 20s because I'm getting this for a massive discount, and it's not an obvious coupon code. It's one of the ones that I like, and so I can let this get down to $25 and it's still profitable. that's a lot of room. That's a lot of time. Even when the pinch happens, it takes time to materialize, and get into those negative numbers. So, uh, yeah, that's one example where I use inversion, and I use it to kind of buck common conceptions
Hmm.
on Amazon products, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. Yeah, I too, I like this. I like this idea of catching the falling knife, which is it's something I believe came from, uh, people who trade stocks and things like that. Like, I don't know. I think we get too tied to this. I have to source at a 30% ROI. It's got to make a $5 profit or I'm out. And if it makes a $3 profit, and we've caught that falling knife without getting cut, well, that was the same as failing. We might as well have just bought a product that we lost money on.
Hmm.
I don't know what it takes to get people out of that mindset. Is it that lizard brain? Is it because the stakes were so much higher before? You eat the wrong berry, you die, and we now we need to worry about every little thing. I don't know. I don't know how to help people get past that.
Well, part of the reason, in my opinion, is, well, I'll throw replens under the bus again. I think it's the replen mindset. Everyone's sourcing now. Uh, like you're trying to find a wholesale type account on retail shelves, right?
Hmm.
You've been told you can source for replens, which you can't. No matter what, I don't care what the price is of the course. I don't care who's saying it. You can't source for replens. Replens are found in your own database as you go back and you go, this is still profitable, or after you assess your test buy. Like, right, but we've been taught to where, because it's the marketing aspect of it, right? We've been taught that if you're selling a replens course and you say, all right, I can teach you how to make thousands off one product that you can see on the shelf, right? That's the pitch. And that's what makes us go, ooh, tell me more. Right. And then, and then you're putting together this sales pitch, and that's all it is. Right. We've demonized finding a product, buying what we're comfortable with, making 100 or $200 and then deleting the listing afterwards. You don't
Hmm.
have to rebuy everything that you source, right? You don't,
Nor should you.
right? Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Basically, we'll talk about some other models that'll explain why. Um, yeah, mean, we've demonized getting in and out, taking a chunk of cash and putting that towards the next few products. I mean,
Hmm.
when essentially that's what you're doing on a small enough scale, in and out, no matter what your model is. I mean, sure, maybe you can go back and maybe it ends up being a replen. That's fine, but that shouldn't factor into your initial assessment, right? It doesn't.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to. And we've demonized the clearance aisle, right? They're all these they're all these keyboard warriors now in social channels and in social media groups and on Twitter and stuff. And we're starting to look down on people for what their storefront consists of. Like,
Hmm.
every single day somebody's going, oh, you got Nike socks in your, so what? I mean, if you're making a decent ROI, and they're chances are they're moving really really fast. And I'm not gonna, I don't want to put a target on my back or anything like that. I understand why they say that. It has more to do with the overall presentation of the profile that they're condemning. But
Hmm.
there's kind of like these clicks and this superiority, that like, if I find your storefront and I look at what your product mix is, you better not have these handful of items, because
Hmm.
that's rookie stuff. And when you boil it down and look at it from the base, at the bare bones, if it's profitable, I don't care what I sell. Right? I can't. People ask me like, "Oh, you sell on Amazon? What do you sell?" And it's like, I don't ever know how to answer that, because I will
Yeah.
sell anything and everything. Like, I have no idea how to summarize it, because I am all over the place, because I try to just pare it down. And you know, take that, not to jump the gun, but the first principles,
Mhm.
perspective.
Hey, Amazon sellers, are you tired of juggling multiple tools to manage your FBA business? Well, say goodbye to the chaos and hello to Boxum, the all-in-one software that streamlines your shipments, inventory, and profitability tracking in just a few clicks. With Boxum, you'll cut your shipment time in half, gain real-time insights into your business, and keep your inventory under control, all from one simple, intuitive dashboard. Don't waste time. Try Boxum today and take your Amazon FBA game to the next level. Check it out over at cleartheshelf.com/Boxum and start your 14-day free trial now. I think the only answer to the question, what do you sell? When you're not a private label seller is whatever's profitable.
Hmm.
That's like, what does Walmart sell? Come on. They sell
Right.
whatever they think they can make a profit on. That is what we do.
Yep. So we'll move, go on and on. Not to, I don't want to start. I got to quit talking about the trolls. Like they're gonna find me. Um, so so we're gonna move on to confirmation bias, and this one's, you've probably heard it before. There's a lot of talk, in political aspects, even completely separate topics such as this.
Mhm.
It does come up quite a bit anymore. Um, but the official description, I'm not sure, the people talking about it politically even know what it means sometimes. But what the actual description is, it means that we tend to search for and favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs, right? Um, Now, how we take this and apply it to selling on Amazon, um, we need to be aware of our biases uh, when evaluating the products. Seek out on purpose contrary information to avoid overestimating a product's potential, right? Kind of deconstruct your own golden model that you've built, or this future profits that you have set up. Here's a classic example of confirmation bias, is a habit of falling in love with a product that, air quotes, should sell well based on early positive results and the research that you've done. What this leads into is, what we always tell you not to, is marrying the product, right? We want to date them, not marry them. So what this does is it'll cause you to be slow on the liquidation process, when liquidation becomes the solution, um, because liquidating the product means I was wrong. And we could be a little hesitant to admit that we're wrong. You can ask my wife how easy it is to get me to admit to being wrong. um, I have an incredible streak, 12 years running, and I'm yet to fall into that category. um, right, it may even be worse, and it may cause us to even ignore red flags, right? And now you're bringing your account health into question. um, if you're missing these red flags, the red flags are indicating that it's time to get out of a product, and still at a profit, but that may too feel like admitting that we made a mistake, right? Because we didn't hit our target ROI. We kind of, and even think about this in quantities, right? You buy 10 of something and you calculate the profit, and it's like, man, it's $20 a piece. It's $200 profit. They're not all going to sell for $20 profit. Like, we need to kind of realize what the ledger looks like. Even if you hand it off to a CPA or something like that, you're not going to get the full $200. It's just, things happen, returns happen, and prices erode. But yeah, confirmation bias is all over the place, right? It's, think about product selection. Like what we think sells well. A lot of times what we think isn't reality. There's plenty of times I bought stuff and I was like, man, this is great, and we're leading into something that confirms that bias that I had, and I get all excited, right? And then what you've done is you've put this product on the pedestal, and uh, everything has to go right for it to live up to that potential now. So and reference the first episode when we talked about the sunk cost fallacy. Um,
Mhm.
this is, you know there's a slot for that right next to each other. Think about like pricing decisions. There may be something may happen. Like there may be liquidation, like you mentioned, something hits Ollie's, right? And chances are Ollie's is going to have it for a much lower cost, even if you've manufactured your margin, and you found a bunch of good codes and stuff like that. I mean, that means the whoever had it before has liquidated. So think about some of your own percentages that you use when you liquidate, and it's not pretty. So if you get stuck in something like that, it's time to adjust, right? But our confirmation bias could make us slow, which means we're going to leak some money that way. And then quantities, you know, uh, current demand may not match what you bought before, or what you usually buy. Say if you're like, I don't do test buys. I'm 20 to 30 every single time. Well, if you're not factoring in current demand, you're just going on the bias of this is what I do and whatnot. If you factor in current demand, um, that may not be the right move. If you like it, you may want to dial it down to 10 in certain circumstances, but confirmation bias can keep us from realizing that that's a smart thing to do.
Hmm. Confirmation bias is, I don't know, to me it's dangerous, uh eh, and it works a bunch of different ways. So, you see people say, "Oh, well, selling on Amazon's a scam." And maybe they bought a course, maybe they, I don't know, watch some social media, they go out, they give it a try, and they lose money on their first product. Well, their bias has been confirmed. Nobody can make money at this. I lost money on the first product. Uh, and it works the other way too. We'll go back to the Nike socks. Someone learns that, oh, I can sell Nike socks for a profit. They do it, and now all they have is Nike products in their storefront, and they're totally missing out on the brake pads and the bug spray and the sunscreen that also sells very, very well. And I mean, they're taking a bigger risk by being siloed into one particular area,
Hmm.
but their confirmation bias keeps them there. Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
the confirmation bias is incredibly dangerous, I think, in both ways. It'll keep you from taking the risks that are necessary to try something new, and also, if you're having success, keep you siloed and maybe limit your growth going forward.
Yeah. It's a factor of it's partially a factor of why we make as much money as we do selling on Amazon as well. If you read
Hmm.
enough of the reviews, right? Because if you can remember back to when you were just a consumer on Amazon, right? You remember how the talk of it was, especially brick and mortars. They hated Amazon because people would go in, they'd look at the products, and then they'd search for it on Amazon, and most of the time you could find it cheaper on Amazon, right? So they'd walk out of the store, right? The store, this brick and mortar, not only they have the overhead and whatnot of, and the employees helping them and so you do all this work to bring this person in, and then they walk out, don't buy anything, and end up getting it on Amazon anyway, right? So
Hmm.
that becomes a confirmation bias because people think, well, if it's on Amazon, that's the lowest price that
Yep.
that you can find it on the market, right? We know now that we've gotten, now that we're working more in the back of the house on Amazon, we know that's not true. And that's
Hmm.
something that we exploit. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing is because markets can never be perfectly streamlined, that'll likely always be there. That
mhm.
availability of that higher price. All right. So first principles thinking. We've mentioned this already, but this is just the model of breaking down complex problems into their most basic elements. So you might apply this when you're outsourcing. All right, breaking it down to its fundamentals: demand, competition, pricing. First principles thinking would ask you to strip away all the assumptions and just get to the core of the problem. And I mentioned it multiple times already. Does it sell? Can I sell it? Is it profitable? I often see way too many people talking about, oh, well, what's the buy box percentage? How often is the buy box rotating? Which is, it's a flawed question. Number one, I understand where the idea comes from, but it's a flawed question. How many times is there a drop in the BSR over the last 90 days? Again, a flawed idea. I understand where the idea comes from, but it does not take into account a bunch of other things that, you need to take into account. Is there demand? How fierce is the competition? Is the pricing sustainable? Most everything else, in my opinion, is really just sellers trying to make themselves feel more confident in a buying decision with data that's not truly helpful or even accurate.
Yeah. Um, this is a big one. And it's one of those where it seems simple, um, but it's so impactful. Um, this is they talk about a Socratic questioning, right?
Hmm.
Have you heard of that? And essentially, it's somehow it's what babies do also,
Hmm.
where they just pepper you with a series of why,
Hmm.
why, and every answer. But like you do that intentionally with Socratic questioning. You basically just you keep asking like, okay, well, um, does it sell? And you say yes, and you say, okay, what evidence are you using that makes you think it sells? And then you'll
Hmm.
say, well, the BSR, or it's got these amount of drops, or Jungle Scout says this category at this rank sells this much a month. It's like, okay, well, where do Amazon doesn't offer this information? Where does Jungle Scout get that? And then so you're boiling it down, and it's like, okay, and what you do is you strip away assumptions, and
Hmm.
and you make sure that when you get it down to right that those first principles, uh, if you boil it down, and then you can reconstruct it, and you can find some truths, and sometimes you find out that it's not exactly the way you think it is. um like we're name dropping Elon Musk a lot. And I liked it better when he was just a weird genius, and he wasn't so divisive, because there's a lot of good to pull uh, from his story and his history. That's obviously to the people that have soured on him.
Yeah.
um, right, but let's take SpaceX as an example. He refused to believe that was how much rockets cost, right?
Hmm.
He blew that up, and he used first principles thinking, right? And he actually broke down all of the individual materials of a rocket, and it's reported that he found out that the materials to build a rocket are only 2% of the, I guess, retail price of a rocket,
Hmm.
right? So he and then so he basically, that's how he made space travel affordable, essentially, right? And it was using this concept, and it was just breaking everything down, right? And but you had to blow up the assumptions that well, that's just how much rockets cost. And it's easy once you frame it like that. It's easy to figure out just how many concepts we have in our own head. And once you start questioning, like, okay, am I is what I think actually reality, or and if you blow up a few assumptions, it can have a major impact, on the
Absolutely.
way you look at things.
Yeah. Which, I mean, there's another mental model that kind of goes along with that idea that you're talking about, which is path dependence. You know,
Hmm.
we get in these ruts. We've got these well-worn paths that we've created because it's worked and it's comfortable, you know, uh, and we become hesitant to go to first principles thinking. We become hesitant to think about new strategies to change course. If we're going to go down the Elon Musk path, which his biography by shoot
Walter Isaacson.
Walter
Yeah.
Isaacson was fantastic. Uh, you know, if Elon Musk was not willing to fly to Russia and buy and try to buy some old rockets. Like SpaceX may never have existed because he got down to first principles thinking. What are the ways that I could get my hands on some rockets? Different than everyone else is doing. And so we got to be careful because technology changes. Amazon forces changes on us and changes the market. And so we've got to really fight this path dependence to really be able to adapt. And I don't know, I see it all the time, especially in sellers who have been around for a really long time. Well, this is how it's always been. And very, very, they want to push back really hard on changes.
Yeah. Think about when we had Steve and Alexa on. It was a very popular episode. It's been quite a long time ago now.
Yeah.
It's like when you think about it. But I remember after we had a mastermind meeting shortly afterwards, right? And Steve and Alexa do a lot of retail arbitrage, and this I think RA is probably a good example with path dependence. You have your stores, right? And it's you have your rotation and you have your process and whatnot. And now Steve and Alexa are selling multi-millions, so chances are, there's no reason to analyze, or force any changes. But from the perspective of it, if you're an RA seller or it's some significant portion of your business, but things aren't where you need them to be, and you just kind of do these stores. But my point is with the mastermind is he mentioned some stores and some different places that the people in my mastermind hadn't even thought of, right? And it opened them up, and at least one of the people in the mastermind actually started going to some of the stores that he mentioned, or the types of stores that he mentioned, and would share profitable stuff that he was finding, right? So so if you're stuck in that rut, and it's like, well, I do this on this day and this day, you need to realize that there may be more stores out there, or even different types of stores. Well, it was pretty on a wide scale in Facebook groups when dollar stores, people started mentioning dollar stores and bundles that you could make from dollar stores, and some of the numbers from dollar stores. And I remember a lot of the comments, it blew their mind. It's like, oh, I never even thought of, or I just assumed that it was junk. Again, there's that word, assume, right? So that's kind of where, path dependence, kind of removing yourself and kind of breaking things down could lead to some real positive change.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So to every first principles thinking, there's the yin and yang, possibly, but we want to talk about second order thinking, right? And this is, don't get to the point where it's all right, Chris and Chris are just making stuff up now. This is an actual concept, an actual model, and it's basically tells you to consider the long-term consequences of your decisions, right? And the application to Amazon sellers in this case would be like when you're sourcing products, think beyond immediate profits. Consider factors like seasonal demand, future competition, market changes that might affect sales of this product. If I find a product with insane margins, but there's an obvious IP issue on the product, like for example, like every time the number of sellers gets to 10 or more, there's a steep drop in the number of sellers down to 2 sellers. But the margins are nuts, and I'm blinded by that, rather than thinking of the second order effects to my account health when I get dinged with that potential IP. That's one example where second order thinking would be appropriate. There'll always be some level of risk in everything that you sell, and you'll have to take some risks. But thinking a step ahead can often keep you out of a potential minefield. It can keep you clean. And this feels like the reciprocal to first principles thinking. in this case, and you could apply, Socratic questioning here too. When you're looking at worst case scenario, the long term consequences. It's like, well, I'm going to buy this product and it's got a potential IP issue, but the profit is insane. And so using second order thinking, you would ask, okay, and then what happens if you get an IP complaint? Or what happens if over a period of time you have 3 or 4 of these products? What if the ding to your account health compounds on that scale that they have? I think, isn't it like usually in eights, right? Isn't it like they'll take 8 points from your score, and then it's 16, and they can be, I think the high end is like 24 points or something like that. You start getting a handful of 24 points, and if you're not a real big seller, you start getting into the danger zone there. um, and then tell me if you think this applies to Chris. um, in the productivity world, and how you, when you talk about that and kind of prioritizing and getting more done, we often hear saying yes to one thing means you're saying no to something else,
Mhm.
right? And I this feels like it's related to second order thinking in my mind. It's not quite the same thing, but the Venn diagram's got a decent
I
amount of overlap.
I think there's a decent amount of overlap. One of the things that I'm always thinking, when I do think about second order thinking is, let's say that you and I are sourcing together, and we find a product and we're like, you know what, let's break our rule of test buying, and we're gonna go deep. Like, this is a no brainer. If we don't buy it all, we're insane. Uh, my very first second order thought would be, if we're going to spend all this capital, you know, that's going to keep me from having capital for something else that could come up. Especially if it's a good time of year for deal. Q4 is coming up, when we are recording this, so we know that deals are going to be abundant. And am I going to miss out on a better deal? Am I gonna, miss out uh, on multiple better deals because that money is tied up? Uh, so yeah, I think saying yes to something now is absolutely saying no to something else down the road.
Hmm. Yeah, and we Saul just mentioned it on the last episode. He said that's kind of how he's trying to organize how he gets everything done, because that guy's got a ton of plates spinning all at the same time. So
Hmm.
he's taken that to heart. If I say yes to this, it means I have to say no to something else, even if what you're saying no to isn't obvious. Um, you talk about going deep. Your example. You have to have a very similar conversation with yourself when you consider uh, low ROI. you
Hmm.
know a lot of people, that's kind of, people who have these thresholds, that's, or to the newer sellers that don't know why they have the minimum of 30% ROI, is it's essentially because you have to assess the velocity. You have to assess how long your capital is going to be tied up. you
Hmm.
know and neither one of us will say never go with a low ROI. There certainly are velocities that'll justify it,
Hmm.
to turn that money over. But that's kind of a concept that you're using, whether you realize it or not. You're using second order thinking.
Yeah, with second order thinking, and even with inversion, we've got to be careful, because we can get into this minefield of loss aversion, where
Hmm.
we tend to overthink. It's just kind of human nature. Yeah. And as humans, we are built to prefer avoiding losses, even if that means, giving up an outsized gain. People would, it, it's interesting. Actually, that may be a story for another time. But we are more afraid of what we will lose, more than we are excited about what we could get, what could be the positive outcome.
Hmm.
And if we're not careful, we can be overly influenced by this. Our We'll go back to our lizard brain. We're wired to stay away from loss, because back when we were, in caves, the loss was your life. It wasn't just, oh well, I lost $5 of capital. You know, and I think a lot of us probably understand this, But I also, I talk to more and more people, and I realize that this is actually a big driver of people not taking risks, of not putting their capital up on inventory. If they don't start that business, they don't invest in that knowledge, they don't pull the trigger on that product that is an obvious no brainer, without any sales rank, because they fear the loss that may come, and you miss out on the huge upside. Uh, so, like, I love second order thinking, but I know that I'm guilty of this. I'm guilty of the loss aversion. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly how to get over it totally. I think I'm better at it than I used to be, but I'm not perfect at it. Thank you for listening to the Clear the Shelf podcast. My magnanimous co host, Chris Rasick, has put together a gift for you for being a listener. It's called the Monthly Goal Tracking Spreadsheet, and it's free. The spreadsheet will help you break down and track how much you've purchased, which should be a leading indicator of how much you will sell, and then you'll be able to track how much you've sold as well as your estimated monthly profit on a daily basis. This will all feed into the daily averages so you can ensure that you're on track to meet your goals each and every month. Grab it for free today over at cleartheshelf.com/goal-tracking. Thanks again for being a listener. Now back to the show.
It's tough. I mean, I'm prone to this as well, and I think ultimately it boils down to the fact, and we've talked about this before too, is that negative outcomes have are way stickier than positive outcomes, and this is true. I mean, I see it in my kids, and it's like you take them out to dinner 3 nights in a row, and then the fourth night it's like, what are we having? Well, mac and cheese. It's like, oh, we never have anything good. It's like, all right, you little shit. But no, I don't say that. Sometimes I do. Right, but it's just that, the negativity is stickier. That's why people are what, 20 times more likely to leave a bad review than they are a good review. I think I read that. I don't think I made that up. But we know it's heavily skewed towards the negativity. Um, I don't. People are going to start drawing conclusions if I continue to have gambling analogies for these models. But I remember a long time ago. This is when my oldest son was little. Might even been before he was born. But me and his mom, we went to Mountaineer, which is a racetrack, right? And I had this. I was studying uh, horse race betting, right? And I was like, I kind of like the numbers, and I was, kind of nerding out on that. I had a system, of course. Um, so we got there, and I was really excited. I was like, man, I want to try this, and um, yeah, part of it is I want to play as long as possible, right? It's I always kind of assess, like, all right, if I can stay somewhere and play for a long time for a minimal loss, that's worth it. That's because I'm willing to pay for some entertainment. I'm not I don't need to walk out with positive gains every single time. Um, because we certainly won't, every single time. So anyway, so we get to Mountaineer, and I'm like, all right, so I got to figure out this, because I think it was like simulcast, so I kind of had to figure out when the races were or whatever. So I went over to the window, and I got the racing program, and I just started. I was kind of reading it, and I sat down at the Keno machine, right, and I put a $20 bill in, and it converted it. It was one of those where it converted it to quarter credits, right? So it gave me 80 credits.
Make the
At
math
20 bucks.
harder.
Yes. Makes your losses. Yeah, you know how everything skews. So anyway, so I just punched some random, birthday numbers and common numbers that were in my life. But I was ultimately just reading this form, and the Keno would beep and whatever, and once it stopped beeping, I knew it was time to hit the button again. I just reuse the same numbers, right? And I'm just kind of flipping through and just repeating this process over and over again. And then all of a sudden the machine starts going nuts, right? It starts dinging and beeping and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, I kind of put the form down. I look over, and so the counter just starts going, right, and it's just ding 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 ding, just over and over again. I was like, wow, I did something good. Like I wasn't even paying attention. I wasn't even looking. I was just kind of hitting the button. I wasn't even sure if I was hitting the right button. That's how engrossed I was in this horse racing form. So anyway, so by the time I'm done, there's over 2,000 credits. And I'm like, well, and I was confused, and I didn't do the math right, but I knew I started with 80 credits. I was like, man, so then I figured it out. I was like, oh my God, I won $500. So I got up, and this is within the first 30 minutes of getting to this casino. I was like, man, they know how to do it, like get the early win, and they're going to bleed me dry, but whatever. I was happy at the moment. So I walked out to try to find to tell, my family that I was there with about my fortunes. And I ran into my son's mom, and I said, hey, I said, I just won $500. And she goes, the look on her face, she was mortified. She goes, I lost $50. I said, but did you hear me? I won 500. She goes, I can't believe it. I was barely at the machine like five. She couldn't get over how fast the casino had taken her money. It didn't even dawn on her that, I had won 10 times what she lost. She was just, the negativity was just so sticky. And I couldn't cheer her up. I was like, I will give you your 50 back. She's like, that's not the point. I was like, all right, I don't understand this conversation anymore. So, but that's that's the gambling story that I can put on that model.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, the next model we want to talk about is the paradox of choice. And this one's pretty neat. I do like this one because the examples of it and stories that could be drawn are always really interesting. But the paradox of choice says that too many options can lead to decision paralysis. And I'm willing to bet that there are a bunch of bells going off in a bunch of listeners' heads right now. What you want to do to combat the paradox of choice is you want to narrow down the data points to avoid getting overwhelmed. Too many decisions, get overwhelmed by these too many decisions, and to make more decisive, profitable decisions. I think many people fear that if they move on too quickly from a product they're trying to source and say it's not profitable or not worth the risk, they're going to miss out. And as humans, we have an innate fear of missing out, even if there are literally millions of other opportunities. So we get saddled with analysis paralysis. So what you want to do is you want to narrow your focus to the data points that really matter, and get rid of anything else that doesn't serve a purpose. You filter out the noise. And my example of this is, it's one I get so mad at myself. Netflix, right? One of the reasons I don't turn my TV on very much anymore is I have so many choices that tell me if this has happened to you. You go, I'm going to watch something on Netflix. You turn it on and you start scrolling through those really neat posters that they have an algorithm for based on what you've watched before to show you which actor, because they actually change the actors and scenes and whatnot of the posters.
Yeah.
So, and next thing you know, an hour has gone by, and all you've done is add 12 new shows to your watch list, and you haven't watched a single thing.
Yep.
Right? That is too many choices, so many choices that I've now been rendered inactive. Like so many choices led to inaction, and just it was a waste of time.
And the problem is it's then, I mean, it's everywhere, because I'll do exactly what you just did. I'll spend some time going through Netflix, and then I'm like, oh, well, there's nothing here, even though I added 6 shows. And so then I go look on Amazon, and I got the exact same problem over there. And I'm like, I shouldn't be watching TV anyway. So I open up my Kindle, and I see, oh, well, I've got 32 books that I've purchased and haven't read. So let me figure out which one of these I should read next.
Right.
Which leads me to, well, let's go see what the best books are, according to a Google search. and it becomes this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
But yeah, Keepa, if we want to bring this back to Amazon, Keepa is a blessing and a curse. I will I'll bring up the examples again. You know, the buy box rotation percentage, or the buy box winning percentage. It is so easy to get drawn into that and say, oh, well, over the past week, you know, who's getting the buy box? What percentage of the buy box are they getting? And over the past month, well, what are we seeing a very similar trend? And okay, well, I see this, but what other correlations do I need to bring into this? You know, how many did they have in stock, and how many sales did they make? When in reality, it's not the full data. You know, we don't see the regional buy boxes. We don't know how often Keepa is pulling that information. And because we've got all of this data to help us make a choice, we're not able to zoom out enough to just realize, does it sell? Is it profitable? Can I sell it? You know, I'm gonna get that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get that made into a shirt. I think,
It's getting close to tattoo territory.
right?
And tell me the paradox of choice. Tell me that it doesn't factor into new sellers and whether they finding out whether you're cut out for entrepreneurship or not.
Hmm.
Um, because a lot of, I think the idea of being your own boss and work for yourself, right? There's a bit of a romanticism to that that draws people in, so many, even people that aren't cut out for it, right? and
Hmm.
and that's not a bad, I'm not saying anything bad about anybody it's that finds out they aren't cut out for this. um but the kicker, you find out very quickly when you decide you're going to be an entrepreneur, that everything falls on you, right? We've mentioned this before, that you
Hmm.
are you are the lead cook, you're the server, you're the dishwasher, you're doing everything, right? So where the paradox of choice comes in that scenario is trying to figure out what to do. Like I have trouble keeping organized. We've had people ask us, how we decide to, how those are the questions when people are curious how you structure your day. Those are people who are,
Hmm.
are having difficulty with the paradox of choice because there are so many tasks to do. You know that there's something productive that you could and most of the time should be doing anytime that you're working on your business. But if there's so many choices, it's hard to figure out where to start, right? And you see a lot of the new sellers on, in these groups and stuff that are timid. They want, they basically want, they need their handheld, and that's, again, I'm not saying anything bad. It's just factual,
Yeah,
because they can't sort through all of the choices and figure out, no, I'm gonna watch this show on Netflix. Yeah, it could be tough.
absolutely. Yeah, it is. I think that this, what I call my ADD, could just be the paradox of choice on crack. Because there are so many things that we have the choice to do. There are so many things that need to be done, and I often find myself, starting one task, and that reminds me of another task,
Hmm.
and that reminds you of a third task, and then all of a sudden you've got 36 tabs open. uh, and we need to find a way around that by making things much simpler. um, Unfortunately, this next mental model does not necessarily make things simpler, uh, but it's probabilistic thinking, uh, making decisions on probabilities rather than certainties, which is something that humans just want. We want certainty in our life. And this is another. If you're not able to think probabilistically, this may be an indicator that entrepreneurship is not necessarily your cup of tea. Which, again, like Chris said, is okay. But you need to evaluate the likelihood of different outcomes for things like sourcing decisions, and choosing products. Probabilistic thinking kind of helps you assess whether or not something will work out in your favor or not without needing that certainty. We're making educated guesses on every product that we source. There's no guarantees. We live in this world of a gray area. We can't predict black swan events. We also cannot predict white swan events. We have to make our decisions based on the probability that they're going to be good decisions. And as long as we're right more often than not, we should be good to go. Um, I have I have this conversation with my son. He's 11, quite a bit, and to him, things are still very binary. It's still very black and white for him. Uh, you know, this is good or bad. This is right or wrong. And there's not a lot of room for reality, which is it's probably a gray area. There's a probability that this is more good than it is bad. And heck, I'm still trying to help him, figure that out. So I don't know. I don't know exactly how to help him do that or to help sellers do that when nothing is guaranteed, nothing is certain.
Yeah, in the from the perspective of Amazon sellers, I think this is another byproduct that salesmanship has kind of forced upon us.
Mhm.
You see a lot of people ask these questions that can't be answered.
Mhm.
And it's because they can't, they want assurances that aren't there. And being productive, being profitable, running a successful business, uh, in spite of the uncertainty of it all, you have to embrace it. This is about embracing uncertainty. You can't, you see in these groups and they're like, well, how much money should I start with if I want to start Amazon FBA? How could anyone else possibly answer that question? You know,
Mhm.
and again, if you go, let's go first principles thinking. Like, okay, like what what's your range? I mean, these are all these are questions that you need to ask yourself. Like, okay, I can put up to this amount, and they want to know, what you're really asking is what are the margins like? What's the cash flow sequence like? There are responses that we can give. Like, hey, the way Amazon runs it, it's going to take probably 45 days to get a full cycle of bought it to sold it to you have your money in your hand again. It takes a little bit longer than, unless this is FBA, obviously. So then you can go into FBM if you need return. But it's all, they're more specific questions. But a lot of them are framed as these big, like, well, how much I mean, if I start selling on Amazon, how much can I expect to make?
Mhm.
Like, what? Like, I can't help you. Like, like we're gonna have to get into the weeds if we want to answer that. Like, but it's been packaged as this side hustle, right? And it's you think you could just take it off the shelf and like, hi, I'd like to buy this Amazon FBA side hustle, and you just go to the checkout line and you open it up and you just follow the instructions. It's not like that. And knowing that it's not like that, think about people that started when the time that you started, Chris. Like, think about how much education and how much guidance there is now compared to when you started.
Oh,
Like, these you guys were figuring it out as you went along. I mean, you had a fraction of the guidance that somebody like me had with only 5 years
yeah. Yeah. I have probably made more courses just myself than there were available when,
in.
when I got started, and now, I mean, there's a course, everyone has a course now. It's crazy how much more education and content there is through the years. Huge leg up nowadays. I know the market is, I won't say saturated. I refuse to. But the availability of information that is available now is a massive advantage for people who want to get started today.
Yeah. I always think that there are two types of people. You'll have the people. Anytime somebody asks, and I'm immediately thinking Reddit on this. Anytime somebody asks, like, "Hey, what's a good course where I could learn more about this?" Right? You're always going to have the person coming in going, "It's all free on YouTube. You just got to look it up." Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's such an ignorant statement to make, because you don't allow for different types of people outside of the way you are, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody is a self-starter, right? There are people who are just have boundless motivation. They're just self-motivated. They just have a motor, and they'll go find this stuff, and they can do great on Amazon because they'll just figure it out, and their bias is towards action, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we know that's a positive, right? However, there are people that need skin in the game, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
look, I've bought courses, I've spent my money on courses, and I've obtained free courses. I know that I am more likely to take the course that I paid money for because I have skin in the game. I now
Mm-hmm.
have something on the line. I've made an investment, and now I want a return on my money. And that's the motivation that I need to, uh, you know, get moving and actually
Yep.
get into something like that. And guess what? I can be successful on Amazon too, right? It doesn't take only the type A personality, the self-starters who find the information for free. Some people need to pay a little bit. Uh, they need a cost, they need an investment, to prompt them. It's
Yep.
the same thing like a seller that's been around for 15 years talking to a beginner. You're just on different chapters. Because you know more, and you can't believe the beginner's asking some of these questions, which seem stupid to you because you've got the curse of knowledge going on. You can't imagine yourself not knowing something anymore. That doesn't mean that if we fast forward 5 or 10 years, that beginner isn't selling more than you are, even though you had a 15-year head start, right?
Absolutely.
So, all right, I lost track of it. I'm doing the next one, right?
You got the next one.
All right. All right. So we're going to talk about the availability heuristic. Um, why do we give me the one that I have trouble pronouncing? I'm going to mute. I'm going to mutilate this somewhere along the line. But what the availability heuristic is, it says that we tend to overestimate the importance of information that is readily available. Um, and basically, just because a product is easy to find or trending doesn't mean it's the best choice. You need to dig deeper into the data and historical trends before making a decision. Now let's take an example. If you find candy corn, which was only manufactured in the 1920s, and it's been the same expired crap year after year that they just keep shoveling out of the dumpster and putting back into bags. Thank you. Shout out to Lewis Black for that joke. Um, so say you find it at a discount on October 30th. It may not be the best time to buy, right? The recent data looks solid, but the sales velocity is likely about to take a dive, right? It's about to peter out a little bit. If that happens, the price will likely erode while sellers are trying to liquidate their stock. And furthermore, if you wait about a week, you may be able to buy the remaining candy corn on clearance and hold it until the price comes back up and sell to people that like disgusting, waxy, gross candy um, in the springtime. You sell it to those weirdos in April, and at that point, it's going to be a really nice profit for you.
Mm-hmm.
So to a new seller, this kind of data may not be readily available, right? They may only see the current snapshot of the price and the sales rank, right? But fortunately, that's one of the things we've become numb to about Keepa, is Keepa can show us history all the way back to when they began tracking it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the understated great things about Keepa.
Yeah. This one's interesting, because we do have so much data that's available to us. And it's kind of hard to think that, oh, well, I can't find the information. Like the information's not readily available when we've got Google, we've got Keepa, we've got, all of these communities with, successful tenured sellers who are willing to answer questions. Um, but I guess I think a lot of times, we may tend to overestimate the information from one source, because it's easily available. It's where I spend my time rather than trying to find information from different it's one of the reasons I'm actually not a huge fan of social media. I don't really like being on Facebook and Instagram and um, Twitter and Discord and YouTube, all these different places. But I am, because I don't want to fall into this trap. I know that, different things are taught in different areas, different information is shared in different areas. And if I'm not keeping abreast of all of those, I know that I'm probably going to miss something because, the kind of seller that hangs out on Twitter is different than the kind of seller that hangs out on Facebook.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that may be kind of the best way to illustrate this is uh, go out and look for information from different sources. That way you can kind of increase the breadth of your knowledge.
Yeah, and that's the value of networking too.
Hmm.
Um, I know the collective groan from the audience because nobody likes talking about networking. I think that's our like least popular episode. I think is the
It,
networking one.
it could be. I don't know. I think it gets a bad rap, which is
It does.
it's unfortunate. And a lot of people talk down about networking on Twitter, for example. Uh, Twitter is a great place. Twitter may be my favorite of the social media platforms, but it's also one of the most cynical. Uh,
Hmm.
you know, and I was just listening, and so networking gets shot down, it gets laughed at, that kind of stuff. Um, but I was listening to another podcast about Benjamin Franklin, How to Take Over the World. It's one of the best history podcasts that's out there. And Benjamin Franklin created this group of peers that they called a junto, I believe is the term for it. And they were a networking group essentially, where they shared information. And once a quarter, each one of the members had to get up and do like a 3-page speech on something that they had learned to share with the group. And they were all there to help each other with problems and kind of have these, let's make sure that we can bounce ideas off each other. If there are business opportunities that one person can take advantage of, let's make sure to help them. um, it is it is one of the most underrated things you can do for yourself, your personal knowledge, your business, is networking and finding a peer group.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about feedback loops. Uh, Feedback loops are a good thing. Our actions can reinforce or diminish our future outcomes. We regularly analyze sales data and feedback to improve our sourcing. We should do this consistently. Um, the cool thing is that I think we get feedback loops as Amazon sellers much faster than just about anywhere else. We can make test buys, we can sell through that inventory and use that data to inform our future sourcing. You know, here's an example. Okay. Let's just say that I'm a newer seller and I've only ever bought things that are under 50,000 in rank that are a 30% ROI and a $5 profit, but I get some new information. I go out and I find some information that maybe is outside of my normal network because I know about the availability heuristic, and I go and I buy a product that is has no sales rank. It's got some steady feedback. It's got some steady uh, product ratings. Um, and it's got a 20% ROI and a $3 profit. But there's only two other sellers on the listing. Well, because I take the chance, I buy a couple of those, I list them and I sell them, and they sell out super quick. I've now closed this feedback loop and realized I've got I've got something here that a lot of people are overlooking, you know? And when you do this, you can do this with like merchant fulfilling, and you get to close this feedback loop even faster. And because we can tighten up these feedback loops, they allow us to continually gather data to fine tune our strategies, to test out new strategies and get feedback on them. My opinion, it's one of the most powerful things we can do. You know, Walmart does not have the ability to have a feedback loop as tight as an Amazon seller does. And so they may go and they may spend, let's say, $1 million on a product. They get it out to their network, and it flops. And now it's in Ollie's, it's in TJ Maxx because they didn't sell through it like they thought they were going to. That may have taken them that may have taken them 180 days to figure out because of how big and bloated they are. We
Mhm.
can figure out the exact same thing on a smaller scale, and honestly, we can do it in an afternoon, you know. We can test out. You can go and buy a product and sell it before you even check out of the store, if it's a fast mover, and get that feedback loop closed in an hour. And I know that sounds like I'm really overplaying it, but it's true. I've done it. you know I've listed
Mhm.
products inside the store, sold them, then checked out, then shipped them. And that feedback loop was closed, within an hour's time.
Yeah, and just think about like earnings reports. It's always it's data about months prior to, right, with the big
Hmm.
corporations. So it's a major advantage being able to close the loop faster. And here's the thing: loops in general are fascinating because we are wired to want to close open loops, right?
Hmm.
It's a marketing scheme. Uh, it's a productivity hack, right? I mean, you run into this multiple times. I've run into it at least, right? But basically, the productivity hack people say is again, you take Ernest Hemingway. One of his most helpful tips, a tip that you see anybody that's giving writing advice. Um, Hemingway used to stop in the middle of a sentence,
Hmm.
and he'd quit work for the day. And he said that it helped his writer's block, that he never had writer's block because he would wake up the next day and he already knew what he was going to say, right? So he knew how he was going to finish the sentence. So when he woke up the next day, he closed that loop and he got words on the page and he was off and running from there, right? And
That's
then
really
inertia
smart.
takes over, and right, and you go from there. Um, a lot of the everyone gets emails, and we're all hit with sales pitches from various different directions. Salespeople use open loops. You use it in your copywriting, to try to sell stuff. You want to leave an open loop, even down to the very paragraphs they teach you. You want to leave the paragraph as an open loop so that it forces the reader to move to the next paragraph and read the next sentence to try to close that loop. That's how we're wired. That's how when you know that's essentially what determines a good sales pitch versus a bad sales pitch, or certain writing. That's kind of why we react differently to different pieces of writing. A lot of it
Hmm.
is the art of leaving open loops and keeping people reading. So it's
I came
powerful.
I came across this in that book you recommended, Very Good Copy by Eddie Schleiner.
Hmm.
I was reading a little bit last night, and he ended one of the chapters on an open loop. And I hit the next page, and I literally said out loud, I was like, "You've got to be kidding me," because it's the next chapter. It's about something totally different. He did not close the loop, and I know that it was 100% on purpose,
Yeah.
I would imagine he's a great copywriter. I would imagine that,
Hmm.
down the road he ends up closing this loop eventually. But because he left that open loop, I now have to read through the rest of the book as quickly as I can to see if he closes that loop.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Even though it's thrown out there that you don't have to read it straight through. You can kind of just pick up you know just pick it up and open any page and kind of read it from there. But
Yeah.
essentially that's what makes speaking of books, that's essentially what makes page turners. We describe good books as page turners.
Mhm.
Essentially it's because of these open loops and obviously the quality of whatever the fiction type, whether it's a suspense or whatever. But essentially, that's what that is. You're just leaving these open loops, and you're making us turn the page because we want to close that loop because we get enthralled with the story and these open loops. So it's
Mhm.
really interesting stuff. So we want to talk about another one that might be familiar, the law of diminishing returns. We've mentioned this before. And what the law of diminishing returns is, it means that beyond a certain point, each additional unit of input yields progressively smaller increases in output. Um, and how we look at this from an Amazon lens is we need to recognize when investing more time or money into something is no longer yielding significant returns, and then shift focus accordingly. Right. So let's say that you source a product that's prep intensive, and you do all of your own prep. Right. So, but over the past 3 months, the price has eroded to a point that you're only making 50 cents per unit. Each unit takes you 5 minutes to source and prep. The product's easily available. You can buy it in large quantities. But when you do the math, you're effectively making $6 an hour sourcing and prepping this one product. Right. So that means the returns have diminished to the point that even though it's profitable and you're getting a return, it's likely not worth your time anymore. Right. So it's that'd be time to set a keep alert for the price to rise and revisit once that happens, once it becomes worth your time. Um, this is this could be a tough one. This takes some perspective, takes a step back sometimes to realize, especially it could be tough to identify when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah. Yeah, which it goes to one of my favorite quotes: "When in doubt, zoom out."
Hmm.
This is a tough one because the item it's still profitable. I can still get it pretty easily, and it seems to make sense. I'm turning my capital over, and it's turning into more capital. But could that hour that you spend, you know, could you maybe make $50, buying a couple of test items rather than the $6 you would make from this one particular item, and it goes back to uh it just goes back to our, you know, I've made this decision, this was a good decision, and now I'm going to keep at it. You know,
Yep.
this was a good buy 6 months ago. So, and I've sold this for 6 months. If I stop selling it, I'm effectively saying that I was wrong. No, you're not wrong. You're just, things have changed. New information has come to light, and we need to move on from the product for now. Doesn't mean it won't be good later on down the road. And I know that this can be tough to calculate our diminishing returns.
Hmm. I heard somebody said something that I'm gonna paraphrase and butcher both at the same time. But essentially, somebody told me that one of the best skills that a good business person has is knowing when to stop.
Hmm.
Is when knowing when to cut it off. That could be far more valuable than any idea. Everybody says ideas are a dime a dozen. And it has to do with the execution, and but people don't realize, there's two parts to the execution. There's bringing it to market if it's a product, or bringing it to fruition, but then knowing when to cut it off, when to cut your losses, is not talked about, but such an important skill.
You That is such a great point. I read a story recently about Blend Tech. Okay, do you know who Blend? Do you know that company? Have you heard of them?
Hmm. I
Okay,
have.
so there's Blend Tech and there's Vitamix. Those are the two like high end, mixers. But Blend Tech was here first, and they essentially created the smoothie market. You know, uh,
Hmm.
and and they are a business that did not know when it was time to pull out. They had a better product, but Vitamix had vastly superior marketing. Blendtech was selling, the actual, our product is great, and this, and we are technologically better. Vitamix was selling the results of use the Vitamix to make smoothies. You're going to lose weight, and they just did it right. Well, at one point, Blend Tech had an offer on the table to buy them for $250 million. They didn't take it. They said, no, thank you. And eventually, down the road, uh, they ended up, having to like pawn off a bunch of their products. They ended up doing a sale leaseback of their warehouse, and part of the agreement was if they couldn't pay the rent on the lease, that the people who now owned the lease would actually own the business. And so an apartment complex developer ended up owning Blend Tech, all because the owners didn't know when it was the right time to get out because they couldn't see, their own shortcomings, which was only marketing.
Hmm. It's like, it's not dissimilar from Apple and Android. Apple's only popular because of marketing, and even though it's an inferior product.
Oh, ah, we're not going to fight on the show. We're going to do it afterwards.
All right. So you doing leverage?
Yeah, so we've got leverage. Leverage is the next thing, and a lot of people don't think about this as a mental model, I think, but it is. Okay, small efforts can lead to outsized outcomes when applied correctly. We should leverage tools, software, outsourced labor to amplify our efforts, which can allow us to scale faster and even more efficiently. Um, eh, Leverage is compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Leverage may be the ninth. Yeah, John D. Rockefeller once said that he'd rather earn 1% off of 100 people's efforts rather than 100% of his own efforts. And there are so many levers that you can pull cheaply in an Amazon business, and you should once you know how to pull them properly. You know, why would you reprice manually when for as little as $27 a month you can have a repricer that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year? At at a certain point, why should you prep your own products when you can outsource to a prep center? And if you do it right, actually put money in your pocket to allow other people to prep your products for you. um there capital is another thing. Why use the money that you've saved up when you can use other people's money to grow this business? Now, of course, some of these levers you have to be careful with. You pull the wrong one, or maybe apply too much force to one of them, especially other people's money, and you may end up upside down. I think we see that, I won't say too often, but we do see that. People will use other people's money, and they will leverage the heck out of it, and then that credit card bill comes due and they haven't repriced effectively, or they've made a mistake and they're not willing to catch that falling knife, and they're overtaken by the pinch. um, Leverage is incredibly powerful. I think we should use it any way that we can, um, as long as we're careful with it.
Yeah, this probably could have been its own episode, I imagine.
Hmm.
that's how many layers there are to leverage. Because there's a whole art of when to make the decision, when to, you know, exercise your leverage. We've talked about it before where, um, sellers, like let's talk about hiring VAs, right? A sourcing VA. Unfortunately, there are sellers who aren't proficient themselves, and instead of getting better, and working on it, and instead of recognizing the fact that they're not very good at it, they'll try to hire a VA thinking that that's going to be a solution, right? When that's the wrong reason. You hire a VA as leverage, because we talked about before, you if you hire a VA, you're the trainer, right? And the training material is your process, unless you somehow come by somebody else's sourcing process. But if you did that, I'm not sure why you wouldn't learn it yourself and get better, right? So essentially, your VA is only going to be a percentage as good as you are, and then what that percentage is basically determined by how well of a trainer you are, right? So there's a lot of room for leakage, uh, you know, if you're not if you're not good at it, and especially if you're not doing it for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a delicate balance, like you mentioned, that's because over leveraging yourself is can be catastrophic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So have you ever found a product? I do this on my lead list. I feel like I feel an obligation to uh, let subscribers know when a product has like less than a year of keep a history, right? I mark it as a newer listing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that kind of, and people have different interpretations and different reactions to newer listings. And basically that's because of the next mental model, because people have different interpretations of the Lindy effect. And what the Lindy effect is, the description is the longer something has been around, the longer it's likely to last. Um, we just we simply like stuff with longer histories, because we feel like it's an indication of future prosperity. So, so you consider investing in products that have stood the test of time rather than chasing the latest trends, as these are often more reliable in maintaining steady sales. And this is, I tell you what, this is the new school versus old school right now, especially. Just mention the word investing, right? Because you've got, we're fans. Our audience knows we're fans of Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger. Um, and they don't own any crypto, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just this YOLO, whatever the sayings are nowadays, where you're just going to get rich, the GameStop stocks and or stonks, or these are words I don't even know what the meanings are anymore. So, all right, so let's go more towards an Amazon example. There's two things that come to mind through the Amazon lens. The first being, you've heard Chris say it numerous times, arbitrage is the second oldest profession. We're not going to talk about the first. We never do. And this is, uh, we're going to keep it civil, right? Um, so in number two, the second part is, but number one, arbitrage being the second oldest means it always has existed, essentially. And the second part of that, when we mention that, is it likely always will. Um, but the second part is this is why we like selling boring products, right? More than the latest TikTok trends, right? Because the boring products, those washing machine repair parts, pen refills, those are the things that um, those are the things that bring us what is ultimately the most exciting thing about the business, and that's cash flow, right? It's I will take a boring storefront all day long, um, because I don't want to deal with. I feel like it exposes me to less unpredictability.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do you agree?
I would agree. brake pads are more profitable than Stanley Cups, uh, because you can sell brake pads for the next 20 years. They're not going anywhere, even if everyone moves to electric cars. You know, still got to have brakes. You got to have a way to stop the car. I don't know, how much longer do Stanley Cups have? Now Stanley, the company, has been around, like 100 years or something like that, you know, but when will the next thing take over Stanley Cup? And it just doesn't go for just Stanley Cups. It's Simple Modern too, which I think is a good company. I like their founder. Uh, but on the long term, brake pads and you know lipstick are going to outsell the next trendy thing. Um, yeah, and we're recording this at a time when Stanley has a new collaboration, I think, coming out either today or this week. Uh, and I'm not going to buy a single one, you know, because I could go and I could spend that money on brake pads instead and be able to sell that for the next 3 months instead of the next 30 days.
Right. Or you just go back to the company that has done more for day drinking than any company in history, and that's Yeti, right?
Right.
And people are just gonna see. I mean, that's all it is, right? I mean, they're just a bunch of day drinkers. Nobody needs that much stuff. Who drinks that much fluids outside,
Right.
and is willing to spend that much? You have to be loaded.
It's insane. And their newest collaboration that I saw is also nuts. Liquid Death and Yeti have a coffin cooler now. It is a cooler shaped exactly like a coffin. Uh, Fantastic marketing. Um, let's talk a little bit about information asymmetry. Um, Something I like to pride myself on. But when one party has more or better information than another party, and because they are, either they have specialized knowledge or tools or data to be able to gain an edge over their competitors who may not have the same level of insight or information. And here's something that I don't think a lot of people think about. I think everyone has this advantage in their back pocket and they may just not use it. You know, because of this information asymmetry, I think, like I said, everyone has an edge. And it's one of the reasons I like to have a breadth of knowledge. The ability to fuse information from one domain into another is a huge hack. That's also a reason you need to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on. You might be able to realize something or learn something that, shows you what may be an unprofitable product now and being looked over by everyone else, but it may have a breakout moment. And I said I don't like to source the trends, but we are opportunistic entrepreneurs here, so I'm not saying I would never do it. uh but or maybe about some niche holiday that you can take advantage of every single year that most people aren't, or maybe some sort of event or a piece of news that's just starting to hit. You can be the one to take advantage of that information asymmetry while everyone else is kind of forced to catch up.
Yeah, and anyone that thinks that maybe this is a contradiction to what we just said about the boring products, there's a distinction, right? Like, if it's a trend that comes with a press release, right? If there's a Barbie Stanley collaboration or something that's been announced, there's marketing, there's a whole PR movement behind it. That's not information that no one else has. Everyone has that
Hmm.
information, right? So that's something I'm not going to jump on, you know. But like, um, you found, like there was this trend of like really really hot stuff, right? And there's, you know, you can find out stuff, and it's not in the mainstream, right? There's no PR behind it. It's just kind of something that took off, um, more word of mouth, right? So that's people who find out about it and kind of see the merit behind the trend and see a little bit of uh, at least short-term popularity from it. That's where this asymmetry comes from, right? That's the difference between the two, in my opinion.
I
Um,
I would agree. I think I might have a better example than what I gave. Uh, so the overlap between Amazon sellers and uh, home inspectors is probably very small. I doubt there's a lot of home inspectors who also sell on Amazon. However, when I bought my house, I had to have a home inspector, and I followed him around and I asked him questions. I mean, he was like, dude, he was like, you ask a lot of questions. Uh, but in this time and asking all these questions, I learned about a tool that he uses to check if the microwave actually works. And it's this little piece of plastic that you stick in the microwave, you turn the microwave on, and if the microwave works, this little, thing inside of this plastic bar lights up. Okay. It I think I can get them wholesale for like a buck 50 or a buck 75. They sell on Amazon for anywhere between 9.99 and 12.95. And they sell well because there are a lot of home inspectors. That is information asymmetry that I have because of the voluminous amount of questions that I ask just about everyone who I meet, and was able to learn that other people may just have looked over. And I think that everyone has that. I mean, you've worked in restaurants, you've sold cars, you have worked in the mortgage industry. I've worked in the insurance industry, I've worked at grocery stores, and I've done landscaping. There are things that we can take from each one of those that give us information asymmetry in the Amazon domain.
mhm.
And I think too few people are trying to overlap what they do know already with what they're currently doing or trying to learn.
Yeah. Um, Another example is I get really jealous of the people that know. Yeah, there are certain stores where the last digit of their sale price indicates, like, I think it's like Home
Costco,
Depot has something. Does Costco do it too? I've never walked into a Costco yet, so
we're going to
I'm
fix that one
unfamiliar.
of these days.
Yeah, well, I finally have one within driving distance. So, but like, I know there's Home Depot. Like, you could basically learn whether it's a nine. Obviously, like a nine means it's not marked down or something. But if it's a seven, there's one more mark down. You can actually learn how many more markdowns or whether it's the final markdown based on the last number of the price tag. Right? That's in my mind, that's big time asymmetry, information, especially if you get it down, because you're going to be able to obtain stuff at a much lower buy cost than, just a random RA seller who just wanders into Home Depot and just scans some stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So, the next one we're going to talk about is this is something I talk about a lot. We mentioned it briefly when I said bandwidth, but the actual model is called cognitive load, and what that means, it's the total amount of mental effort being used in the working memory, right? And how we need to apply this, how do we need to be aware of it and take advantage. We need to simplify the decision making processes, right? You want to use checklists and automation to reduce this cognitive load. That'll enable you to focus on higher level strategic decisions. Managing too many tasks at once, whether that be pricing, customer service, sourcing, etc., it can overwhelm even the most experienced seller. If you have employees or VAs who are not capable of caring about your business so much as you are, which is everyone, this is doubly true. And this is why you should have checklists. This is the importance of SOPs, if you hear that term thrown around, and automation, right? You want to automate what you can within your budget. This eases the cognitive load, and that's going to allow you to focus on the strategy you should be employing and the direction in which your business should be going.
Mhm.
Um, I talk about this a lot. Just this is even like it's taken on like normal conversation, like, oh, I just don't
Yeah,
have the bandwidth for that. Like I find myself talking in those terms a lot.
absolutely. I actually I talk about this a lot as well. I call it decision fatigue.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about this. Uh, just to source one product on Amazon, we've got to find the product, and maybe that's the easy part. Maybe you see a sale and you're like, I'm just going to source every single item here. Okay, so that's the easy part. But now I've got to find the match on Amazon, or find the matches if there are multiple listings. And then I need to look at, does it sell? Can I sell it? Is it profitable for each one of those? And then I may go even further, like, well, now am I going to buy five? Am I going to buy 10? Am I going to buy 20? Or are you a nut job who buys like 200 at a time, on a very first buy? Um, there's so many decisions to be made. And I tell my wife all the time, at the end of the day, I'm like, I'm so tired. And she's like, come on, you sit at a desk and you record videos with your friends. Like, what are you tired? And I'm like, but with all the things that we do, there's so many decisions to be made that I am, at the end of the day, I am exhausted from decision fatigue. I actually read a study just recently that said that when you think really hard, or even too hard, they said in the study, that it hurts. There's actually like a physical pain that your body feels when you think too hard. Uh, and and a lot of us are thinking too hard. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I mean, here's the thing: is what do they say? We make 10,000 decisions in a I don't know if that's the whole day or a short period of time. The problem is, uh, if you're forced to make too many decisions, it affects your willpower, right? And
hmm,
so that's why, like when in the dieting world, that's like if you can kind of regulate your menu, if you eat, it's a lot easier to stay within your calorie allotment if you eat the same things every single day, right?
absolutely.
And then once you realize that um, there's no more joy in your life when it comes to food, and you come to accept that, it's actually kind of comforting, right? Because you just go, all right, it's this time, you know, I need to chew on these these cardboard that they call rice cakes, or whatever it may be, but that's just kind of what you do, and and it's easier that way, and you can stay within your calories.
Yeah.
There's a reason that I know he's growing his hair out or something, like I know Zuck is getting a little wild these days, but when he was back in his black t-shirt and jeans every day, he that was intentional, right? He
Yep.
wore the same thing every day on purpose so that he wouldn't have to make that decision, right? Because he knew he needed to reserve that bandwidth. He needed to reduce the cognitive load because there were going to be much bigger decisions throughout the day that he wanted to be sharp for, because there's because it does, you're right, it fatigues over the course of a day, if you have too many to make. So this is a real thing. This is, as much as I can't get my mom to believe me. It is a real thing. And there's information coming out, and it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I stole that from Zuck, the dark colors only on top. Uh my wife doesn't care for it. She's not the biggest fan. You know, I, I need to pat us on the back just a little bit. This might sound like bragging, or whatever, but what other Amazon podcasts do you hear about Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, John D. Rockefeller, rockets, uh, uh, writers, copywriting, and it's all pulled into Amazon. Uh, if this is not the most well-rounded Amazon podcast, I'd like to know which one is. But that brings us to the quote of the week, which again is going to come from Elon Musk, who is a first principles thinker, a fan of mental models. The normal way we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. With analogy, we are doing this because it's like something else that was done, or it is like what other people are doing. With first principles, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths and then reason up from there. And that really is what these episodes have been about, is kind of stripping away all the fluff and helping you make better decisions faster, because the faster we can make decisions and the better we can make those decisions, the more we can grow and the more profitable our business can be. And hopefully it can be done with a little bit less cognitive load. So um, this was another fun episode. All right.
I like this so much.
That's the pod, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot on your phone and share to Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite FBA group, and be sure to tag me and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear more from us in the future. Also, I'd like to give you some free gifts for listening. Head over to rabbittrailchallenge.com and repricerchallenge.com for some free courses to further your business. Thanks for listening.